So what is public banking? First, let's get through what is banking in the first place. So banks, which are mostly privately owned, are money lending institutions. They lend money on interest, and that interest which you pay is basically what makes up the profit of that is what makes up the profits for the bank, right? So if they give you $100 and then after 1 year you pay them $100 plus 10%, which is $10 extra, $110 in total, then that $10 is what is the main profit for the bank. This is a very simplified version of what banking actually is, because in reality banks don't even lend the depositors money. They actually create money out of thin air when someone asks them for a loan, and then they lend that newly created money with interest. That's what happens in banking. And then they, like, as you pay them back, they lend out more money, which again is created out of thin air. So this is what happens in banks, right? They lend money to people, and they don't just lend money which other people gave them. As I told you, they create money, right? They're the one who create more than 95% of the money in the society, not the government. So a direct consequence of this is that, like, think about this. Think about one entity that would need a lot of money to basically run the society, which is, okay, so the answer is government, okay? The government needs money to build infrastructure, to provide services, to pay its workers, and like government needs money for all sorts of things, right? But where will the government get the money from? So the government takes the money, it borrows the money on interest from private banks for all its for all the development that the government might do in a country, right? All the infrastructure that it might develop, all the services that it might provide. It takes the loan from the private banks. But when it takes the loan from the private banks, it has to return the principal plus a huge amount of interest. So where does that come from? It comes from our pockets, right? To make up for those huge interest rates, we have to pay high taxes, and government actually has to cut down on a lot of its plans, on a lot of its infrastructure plans, on a lot of its services, just to save extra money to pay back to the private banks. So what is the solution to this? The solution to this is public banking, okay? Because in private banks, the banks owned so much, like the private banks owned so much of the government because it lent money to it. So now the government is not independent; it's obliged, in a sense, to banks, and we, the citizens, have to pay the price for all those interest rates. But instead, if the bank was not owned privately, rather if it was owned by the government itself, then all that extra interest rates, all that extra profit that the private banks used to suck through all the society, all that profit and all the prosperity that the private bank used to suck through us, will actually come back to the government and will come back to the public itself. So public bank is defined as a bank owned by the state, the government, or the municipality, right? So that's what public banking is. It's not privately owned, rather it's owned by the people who run the society, who take care of the society. So public banking, so when the government will take loan from a bank it itself owns, so when it will pay it back, it will be paying back to itself, and then that money can again be channelized to the society itself, right? So this is what public banking is. And when banks which are public will make policies and rules, it will not put the interest of few people like it is in the case of private banking. Rather, it will put the interest of the public, of the society as a whole, in view. Now this is what public banking basically is, right? Look, there's a very interesting paper by Ellen Brown. I'm going to read it out. Public banking may be a radical solution, but it is also an obvious one. This is not rocket science. By developing a public banking system, governments can keep the interest and reinvest it locally. According to Kennedy and Cruz, that means public savings of 35% to 40%. Costs can be reduced across the boards. Taxes can be cut, or services can be increased, and market stability can be created for governments, borrowers, and consumers. Banking and credit can become public utilities, feeding the economy rather than feeding off it. And when Ellen Brown says that public savings of 35 to 40%, what she means by that is basically, so there's a research that says that everything we buy, 35% to 40% of that goes to interest, to the private banks. It goes to the private banks. But if the banks will be public and all that interest will be reinvested locally, then we'll be saving up to 40%. And what will that result into? That will result into reduction in tax or increase in services. So that is what public banking is. Okay. Now, I have a different idea for public banking, which I haven't heard anyone talk about it. Probably someone did talk about it, but not in my knowledge. And that is, like, let's take this public banking concept to the next level, which is public, like the banking institution would not be public just in the sense that it's owned by the government or the state, or a few people of the municipality or something like that. But rather, it will be the shares or the percentage ownership of the bank should be in the form of shares which can be openly traded in the stock market. So you can buy and sell shares. Any person, just any person, can buy and sell shares or stocks of a public bank, which is already the majority of the share of the bank has to be in the hands of the state or the municipality, or a welfare organization to which majority or the consensus of the society agrees on. But a certain portion of that, let's say 50% of it, should be buyable by the rest of the society, by the common man. He should be able to buy the shares and sell the shares in the stock market. And depending on how much shares he owns, he would actually get profits. Like when the bank will earn profits, he'll get dividends out of it. And if he has more shares, he'll get more dividend, right? And in this way, not just the municipality or the state, but directly the common man will have a direct role in banking policy, in how the bank operates, right? So this will be taking public banking to the next level. And I, as a proponent of Islamic banking, think that if this concept of public banking is combined with Islamic banking, then that would be the best thing. That would just be the best form of financial institution. So I'll talk more about this in later videos. And this is it for this video. And let me know in the comment section what you guys think of this. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel already, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel. And if you think anyone else might find this idea interesting, then please share this video. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Assalamu alaikum.